And we appear to be live.
Uh-oh.
Woo!
Are we recording?
And there was much celebration. We're live. Wait. Yeah. Tastes like philosophy.
Hey there, hi there, and ho there. Welcome to Bad Philosophy, episode 166, title yet to be determined. I'm your host, Kevin Saunders. I'm here with Stephen Torrence. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, I'm still in Toronto, and there's a lot of snow around. It's pretty cool.
It snows in places? That's
It
weird.
snows a lot in places.
Cool. So welcome to Bad Philosophy. That's what I said already. We are also joined today, and I'm super excited to have him here. A longtime friend of the show. I don't know if you've ever been on before, but if you have, I forgot. Simon Ponder is joining us here.
There's no
Say hello,
snow
Simon.
around me right now. I'm in San Antonio. There's no snow.
I don't think snow exists in San Antonio. I think it's the law.
Yeah, so we get about a quarter inch of ice every 10 years, and that counts as a snow day because it shuts the city down.
Yeah. I think so. I briefly lived in I say briefly for like 2 years. Lived in Ohio, where they get snow so often that like it shuts the city down for maybe a day, and then you have to just live in snow for a while, and that's miserable.
Do they salt the roads in Ohio and all that? Like,
in the
hold
major
on,
cities, they do. In the little town I was in, they plow them, but they don't salt them, if I recall correctly.
Mm.
The university would salt the sidewalks though, so that was better, I guess. So a needle pulling thread. So we're here today to talk about something that I know very little about, but luckily I brought in someone who knows more about it, and that's this everlasting argument about film versus digital in photography, and videography, and in movies. And that's why I brought Simon here. Simon, who is on a couple of different podcasts, PD Exposures and Plastic Imagery, both podcasts that are about the luxury of film, I might say. But maybe you can explain a little bit better, Simon, what your two shows are about.
Okay. Is that the end of the intro?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Say something. I don't know. I'm only halfway through my first cup of coffee, so
Yeah, I haven't even had
It'll get
coffee
better.
yet. So there's just an awkward pause. PD Exposures is more about news going on in the film photography world. What are the latest developments? What product lines have been killed off? What new cameras are coming out? That kind of thing. Plastic Imagery is more about the toy camera world, which is the Holgas, the Dianas, the Lomos. Certainly something more to what I enjoy shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is PD Exposures is kind of an umbrella which covers all types of film photography, and then the other shows are more specialty shows.
Okay, cool. All a part of the PD Exposures network at
Yes.
pdexposures.com. Get the plug in early, Simon.
Yeah.
As if people listen to this. I don't know what your numbers are, but our numbers aren't great, so...
We're going to break 1,000 someday. 1,000
Someday.
regular viewers. Yeah.
Someday. Maybe. No, so this whole episode got started off with a discussion and sort of a demonstration put together by a gentleman named Steve Yedlin, ASC. Yedlin. And we'll have links to this, obviously, in the show notes. But he did something really interesting that I find interesting as sort of a photography, videography opposite of nerd. I don't know what that is. Idiot. So he is a director of photography and puts a lot of work into sort of figuring out how both film and digital work. And he created a demonstration of these filmed scenes sort of side by side or one after the other that he shot with a digital camera and then with a film camera, and then digitally manipulated the digital imagery, does that make sense, to make it look as close to film as possible. And to my untrained eye, they were effectively identical. And so I would love to hear from someone like Simon, like what your initial response was to something like that.
There have been these videos that have existed many, many times over the years,
Sure.
and I feel like if you were to replace out the terms film and digital with pencil versus pen, it
Uh-huh.
would be the same fucking arguments. The
That's
exact
interesting.
same. This is how interesting I find it to be, is like it it doesn't matter the quality of the pencil or pen, it's
Uh-huh.
the skill and talent of the person using it who is able to create art, right?
Of course.
Right. If you're very skilled at illustration, and I hand you the shittiest pencil ever made, you will be able to learn the pencil and then be able to produce some quality work from it, right?
Hmm.
And if I give you the best pencil ever made, you will learn the pencil and then you will be able to produce some quality illustrations.
Hmm. All right. Well, it seems like we got an episode in the can. Let's
Yeah,
call it
great.
a day.
Cool.
That being said,
Some
there are
cats.
in the past there have been technical differences.
Uh-huh.
One of the things I shared with y'all is in digital it's called dynamic range, in film it is called latitude.
Hmm.
And so I think they compared Vision 3 film, Kodak Vision 3,
Okay.
which is something I have almost no experience with as a film photographer. It's a completely different film stock than what I'm used to experiencing. Uh, Traditionally, it was slide film had I believe 5 stops of latitude, um, and then your color reversal films and black and white films had about 14 stops of latitude, and then digital fell somewhere between the middle.
Okay.
So your color slide film, that's your older, that's the y'all know what slide film is, right? I don't have to
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
But
try and find the words to.
you want me to try and explain it?
Yeah, because
And
I'm
you
I'm
can
still
see how
waking up.
well I do or do not know it. So traditionally, when we're shooting on like film that you went to Walmart and bought some Kodak film, you were shooting on negative film, and so the light hit that in such a way as to create a film negative, which we would then use with a certain type of photosensitive paper, which would reverse that when you were actually printing the image. Slide film was the backwards of that. So when you shot it, the light exposure reacted with the chemicals so as to create a duplicate of what it was saying. So there was no negative necessary. So you could drop it into a slide projector, throw it up on a wall, and say, hey, here's a picture of me in the Dead Sea sinking.
Yes,
Or
absolutely.
not sinking, which is what
Uh,
happens in the Dead Sea,
I've
actually.
never been to the Dead Sea, but I am not buoyant at all. And so I've
You,
always wanted to go.
yeah, you would still float. It's just
I
kind of
hope
a
so.
property of salt water.
I've been in oceans, and I really and I'm very not buoyant in oceans. Like I can make myself float
It's
if I try.
it's really really salty water.
We'll put it to the test one day.
Yeah.
There you go. So that was actually a very good explanation. I was just struggling to find the words in my head. Um, so given that range, right, where digital kind of falls somewhere between the middle latitude wise,
Hmm.
that was traditional. Now I was looking at this last night, and it said Vision T had about 13 point something, according to Kodak, and then other tests showed it had 14.5 latitude. Um, the
More latitude is generally considered a better thing, right?
Yes, so latitude has to deal with the different stops of light and shadow that you'll get in a scene, right?
Hmm.
Gotcha.
So when you're
The
in the
dynamic
studio,
range, right?
yeah, the dynamic range is the
But
term used
it's
digital.
dynamic range and digital.
Yes,
Hmm.
but the two are about equal. There's this whole I tried to read through it. I got bored and frustrated. There's an article that I submitted last night about why dynamic range should not be equated to latitude, but it was a lot of physics terms. and a lot of formulas.
Yeah.
And I went, no, I'm out.
That's reasonable.
Just because I couldn't understand it. It was a lot of big words that it'd be like every third word I was looking up a word in the dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
Physics is like that. It makes your brain hurt.
Yeah, it's dumb.
Different language.
But anyway, yeah, you want more latitude, more dynamic range, obviously, because that's kind of how the human eye sees, right? The human eye can see the mostly fine detail and shadow. At the same time, it can see most of the details in the bright light, right? So you want to find a film stock or you want to find a digital camera that can equate those and balance them out. That way, when you're watching something, it looks more realistic to your eye, right?
That's how The Hobbit worked, right?
Yes, even though The Hobbit kind of gave me a headache.
Yeah, apparently you're not
For a
alone. I
different
never
reason,
watched
though.
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
the Hobbit looked, at least in terms of color and lighting accuracy, really well. I don't know if accuracy is the right term, but it looked good.
Yes.
It felt weird because of the frame rate, though.
Right.
Which we covered extensively on an episode at the time, I think.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it.
It's okay to miss.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've gotten that.
It's not a good film either. I think that would be an example of like what you said, Simon, is you can have the best in the world. You can have the best pen ever and still make a really shitty drawing with it. And I think that's kind of what Peter Jackson did with The Hobbit. And he got way too into the tech, you know.
And I think it's interesting that you have me on to talk about this because I shoot Holga cameras, which have a plastic lens.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I think is fascinating as well, and something I kind of wanted to dive into is so I know General, you shoot film.
Yes.
I don't know if you shoot digital, although you just mentioned you take a lot of dumb photos on your iPhone, and I think that counts.
Yeah. Well, I have a side gig with a studio, and we travel the country and do photo ops at comic book conventions.
Oh, cool.
So I shoot digital there.
Yeah. But I know you enjoy shooting film,
Yes.
and that's something that you take a lot of pride in and things, and that's really exciting to me. And I think it's also like super fascinating that you love to do things with Holgas, and I didn't know what a Holga was before I met you, and I still only kind of know, but it's a toy camera, and so something that I sometimes feel like happens with people who are let's say film zealots. I'm looking at you, Christopher Nolan. I'm looking at you, guy who directed movie. I can't think of names. He's directing Star Wars Episode 8.
Okay.
Rian Johnson? Yeah.
Ryan. It's pronounced Ryan.
Ryan.
I learned that when he was on a podcast I listened to once, and I was like, finally. Yeah, Ryan Johnson, who sometimes sort of believe that there is this magic to film or this uniqueness to film that I think is a little bit more in question to me.
It's a little magical. It's plant matter and silver absorbing light. That's pretty magical.
It is. That is pretty magical. I'll give you that. But then you have sort of this niche industry of things like Holgas and other toy cameras where my understanding of the Holga, from what little I know, is that every single one shoots differently because of the sort of flaws in its construction and the sort of uniqueness of the fact that it was not made to stand up to time or is just sort of this toy that also happens to take photos.
So the Holga was made about 2 decades too late for what it was intended to be.
Okay.
It was intended to be a prize one at like the fair.
Okay.
So it was like a $2 camera that you could win at the fair.
Yeah.
The problem is they started work on this in the 80s, and compact cameras had finally gotten cheap enough that mom and dad were buying them. Whatever. Let's just completely ignore that. If this had been made in the 50s and 60s, it would be
amazing,
the most normal thing in the world. So it was made for that, but the reason why some photographers started latching onto them is it forces you to think with the camera
Mm-hmm.
more so than I feel like my digital does. And
That's
the reason
interesting.
why is because there's a fixed focal length on the
Uh-huh.
lens. It's a 60 millimeter lens, and there's no lens hood, there's no accessories, there's no. They started coming out with flashes in the mid 2000s for it, so it finally got a flash. Um, but you kind of had to use your feet, and there's this parallax. Is that the term? Yeah.
That is
So
a term.
yeah. So when you look through most traditional cameras, most SLRs, most rangefinders, there's a compensation, or you're actually looking through the lens of the camera, and so you
Mm-hmm.
can frame everything up, and you know what's going to be in there.
Yeah.
The Holga, it's slightly off from the lens, where the viewfinder is. So you're not necessarily looking through the lens. So you have to think about composition based upon that camera. And because it has a fixed focal length, you have to use your feet to adjust what's in the photo.
Okay.
So it's teaching you a different editing process. And then on top of that, it's got a shitty ass lens on it, so there's going to be like lens flare, suns in it, and stuff like that. So you have to be aware of what is in your photo.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great learning tool.
That's really cool. That's
It
a
has
good way of
no
looking
mercy.
at it. So you got
This ties in to the film digital comparison, and in that, and this is an argument I'd never really heard before. As Steve Yedlin puts it in this in the side by side demo, there's a matter of like taking control of the preparation process that happens with digital, or that can happen with digital to such a well, to a different extent.
Mm-hmm.
With film, there's sort of the post processing that you do. That's, as he put it, it's very, it's kind of like one or two steps. I'm simplifying, but it's that. And in the digital world, it could be 100 steps. You could do a lot more work after actually shooting what you're shooting.
Yeah.
And it seems it's really not a question of which one is better, but at which point do you want to put in the effort. So in the instance of the Holga, right, you're putting in a lot of the framing thoughts, the focus, the lighting, all of that. You're putting that in before and when you take the photo. Versus many people who shoot digital are just like, I'll fix it in post. I'll shoot it in the general direction, crop it, do a color correction later, like take out the lens flare with Photoshop. It's all sort of pushed out, farther down the line.
Yes.
And that seems to be the only difference to me. It's like you can still get whatever results you want if you choose to intervene at some point in the process.
Yeah. So one of the things I remember learning in school, and this is, I don't know which photo class this was this term called the economy of the shutter.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you click the shutter, it costs you money, right? If you're shooting film, every time you click, it costs you money.
Absolutely.
Digital doesn't have that. So what you'll see that some photographers are lazy and just be like, I'll edit 50 photos to find that one, burst mode, and then fire away. And
hopefully something good comes out.
Yeah, and that's fine if you're shooting, let's say, because I used to shoot football when I was at Tech, right? I used to shoot basketball. It's kind of okay when you're looking for that 1 in 10 exposures where you got the guy perfectly lined up and he's the ball has just left his hand and it's about to go to the receiver. That's fine. I'm going to take 6 exposures right there, but I'm not going to just go for,
the whole time.
Up to that.
Yeah, we have something for that. It's called shooting a movie.
Right.
Well, we used to call it spray and pray.
Also a terminology used in machine guns
and pornography.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, is it?
I don't know.
What?
Weird.
Just go with it.
But it's funny you mentioned that because I've been to events where I could tell that was happening. So I had I've been at exhibitions or things like that for whatever, and there would be someone with I assume very fancy, very expensive digital SLR camera, and they would just basically sit there and hold the shutter button and just have it click, 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 click for like minutes. It felt like.
Yeah.
and I kind of wanted to go like, what are you accomplishing there? Like, I could just shoot a movie and then go in and pull out a frame later at that point.
Yeah, it'd be about as effective because if you have to think about it, they have to dump all those photos onto their computer.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I used to shoot 300, 400 photos at a concert or 300, 400 photos at a football game.
Uh-huh.
But that's, a 4-hour affair.
Yeah.
That's like shooting a wedding.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. And
so I'm curious about. I'm sorry to kind of to be the guy who comes back to the topic on this one, but I'm really curious
Go for it.
about this, like the religiosity around film versus digital, and whether, like, what is the actual intensity of it, and what, is it just sort of, is it a verbal battle, or is it affecting the industry somehow, right? Is this still like something substantial that people draw the battle lines over, or something?
I think some people still draw battle lines over it. I honestly do. I mean, if you go on Twitter and you're a part of, the film photographer community, and, sometimes if you say something the right way, it'll be, everybody will throw a pissing match.
Yeah.
Fuji just the other day killed off, like, this film line called FP100C. It was a Polaroid type film where you've seen it in movies. It had like the accordion style camera, and you pull it out the side, and then pull it apart, and there was your picture.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah. So it was the last of that film line that Fuji killed off, and people threw a hissy fit about it, even though I was like, dude, you probably didn't never shoot that, did you? And they're like, no.
But I wanted to.
I wanted to. It's like, well, they killed it off because they didn't have any customers.
Yeah.
So it's your fault.
So I don't know what you're bitching about. But then they'll do these stupid things where they'll start a Kickstarter to raise the money to buy the factory, and it's like, you can't.
Didn't they do that for Polaroid? Didn't that actually happen?
It did happen for Polaroid, but the people who bought it actually knew how to make Polaroid film.
Oh, that's convenient.
So it wasn't like this, like, us three trying to buy a Polaroid factory.
Would not go well. Not go well.
With no knowledge of how Polaroid worked.
I know how it works. I take a picture, it spits out the picture. What else do I need?
Yeah, and then you shake it, even though you're not supposed to, because shaking it actually damages the chemicals inside of it. But
I've heard the song. It says "Shake it like a Polaroid picture."
And he is wrong. Yeah, so that worked with Impossible, but they want to like buy the machines. It's like, no, you have to buy the whole building because the machines were built inside the building, and they're the size of the building.
Wow. And the whole thing is like, you still have to come up with a business model if you buy the factory, right? Like, you can't. You can run it as a charity if you have enough money, but that was the problem: is there weren't enough people with money involved in it, right?
And not only that, but when these film lines die, it's not just because no one was buying them. In the case of Polaroid, one of the things that Impossible Project has run into a lot of times is Kodak used to buy a lot of chemicals from other companies.
Oh.
And when Polaroid went under and stopped buying as much, of the special glue that they used, for instance, the company that made the glue went out of business because that was their only customer.
Yeah.
Where do a lot of the chemicals used in film come from?
Plants?
Like how are they sourced and mined and that?
I actually don't know that. I do know that there were 5 places in the world that produced all the color film in the world.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
There was Agfa, Fuji, Kodak, Ferrania, and somewhere else. I know there's a 5th one. And they pretty much just produced. They would produce everybody's film, right? So if you were like Walgreens and you wanted to come up with your own film for whatever stupid reason, Walgreens would quite often, or one of these other companies would buy the acetate from Kodak and then the emulsion from Ferrania, marry the two together and be like, look, we made a film. when really it
Not
was.
really.
Yeah,
It's not a
but
film.
it reminds me a little bit of like, a cell phone provider who just uses someone's existing network and pretends that they're a new cell phone provider, right?
Like
Like it,
I'm
Boost.
looking to use
yeah,
Straight Talk and Boost and a whole
yeah,
bunch of other ones.
totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as like an industry, was there collusion among the film producing companies in the later days or at any time?
I honestly don't know about that.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't think there's any way to prove
Probably.
there was or wasn't. I mean, it's one of those things when a company, it's. I think in every industry there are those companies that there's a handful of companies that are the big companies in the world, and they own 80% of the market, and there's everybody else.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, they might have shared things with each other, but I mean they competed pretty fiercely. Ferrania and Agfa kind of had control over Europe.
Hmm.
Kodak
Hmm.
was very much an American brand, right? But Kodak worked hard to keep Ferrania and Agfa out of America, and they worked hard to keep
That's
Fuji
interesting.
out of America.
Yeah, I've never heard of these other two. Like I've heard of Kodiak, Bear. I've heard of Bear Photography
Kojak.
and Fujifilm. Like I know those, but these other two you're mentioning, like it's interesting 'cause I've never heard of them before this moment.
So Ferrania is in Italy,
Okay.
and Agfa, I believe, is in Germany.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I do want to pause for a moment just to so the Yedlin stuff obviously comes from moving photography or movies as we call them today. And your mentioning of the Polaroid reminded me of one of my favorite scenes that was shot on film that involves a Polaroid, and that is the opening moments of Memento by Christopher Nolan,
Hmm.
who I believe is one of these like film zealots.
Mm-hmm.
He shoots everything on film, and there are I don't know his actual opinion on it. Maybe just he knows he knows how to shoot on film well, and he can make good looking movies that way. But there are certainly folks who love Christopher Nolan because he shoots on film, which I think is fascinating. Because the reason Christopher Nolan films are visually interesting is not because they're shot on film, in my opinion.
Hmm.
I think
What?
he knows how to shoot film well,
Hmm.
but I think well he's got a certain visual style, and a lot of that probably comes from his DP as well. But who I think might be Steve Yeldon now that I'm thinking about it. That may be a weird connection in my brain.
See, I thought Steve Yedlin was Ryan Johnson's
That's
DP.
what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah,
You're right.
because that was the Twitter exchange, right? Is
Yeah.
Ryan was like, "Hey, this is a really cool thing that my DP created," and
And
that
he's like,
kind
I'm
of
still shooting on film.
yeah. We're still shooting Star Wars. Yeah.
But that's the thing that like would also have to say to somebody, like he would have to like because people would get mad if Star Wars wasn't shot on film.
Was Episode 7 shot on film?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
But people would get mad about it otherwise. People would get
Yeah.
mad if it was not shot on film.
And I think that has
Uh,
more to do with the fact that Georgie shot episodes 1, 2, and 3 on digital,
yeah.
and episodes 1, 2, and 3 were garbage.
Uh,
But again, I don't think that has anything to do personally with the medium in which they were shot.
It doesn't, but you know what? Fuck George.
That's fair.
yeah.
I got no argument there.
Sorry, brief side note there. I just saw THX 1138 for the first time a couple of
Yeah.
days ago. Decent film. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Logan's Run, Brave New World, whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
nothing revolutionary, but he totally Georgified it. I did not realize. Like he went back and did an episode one or did a special edition kind of thing where he
Oh,
went and
that's
replaced the
interesting.
special effects in THX 1138, and I'm like, what it's just a few things. Like
But
it's just kind of what
he's
we're
always been
matching.
doing that.
Have you seen the special edition of American Graffiti?
What?
There are
No,
Jawas in it.
I don't believe you.
They're good. I'm trolling.
I'm sorry.
But I mean, but that's the thing that's interesting is that Georgification, so to speak, even happened in the original home media releases of Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
So like there was that's always been a part of Star Wars fandom such as it is, and having the VHS version as opposed to the Laserdisc version, which was the better, the least edited version to get closest to what was originally in the film. And I do know somebody who has the Laserdiscs, so if you're interested, let me know.
What was
he
that
also has a
project that some people were going to like reassemble or assemble like an HD cut from the film prints, kind of,
well,
and like some broadcasts, and it was like a kludge together of like the original version, but in high
definition. The best known version I know is called the Despecialized Edition, which is done by a guy named Harmy, who has put a whole lot of work into trying to make it look identical to what it did before. And from the imagery I've seen, it looks pretty good, but I'm also not enough of a Star Wars fan to be like, yes, have to, must be, exist. But that's interesting. So I want to circle this around a little bit to first of all, Simon, darn you for being so darn reasonable about this whole thing. I was hoping to like film and digital and have a fight, but now you're just like reasonable and a cool person, which I already knew, but it's made this experience much less argumentative. So you obviously choose to shoot film and digital. I want to know, what efforts do you personally have to put in for shooting one or the other? So you sort of mentioned the economy of the shutter, which doesn't exist in digital. But what are some of the things that are different for a novice like me if I were to go shoot a movie or a picture?
Well,
what are the important distinctions?
If you were to just immediately say, hey, I want to pick up a film camera, they're cheaper. They've cratered in price. It's wonderful. You can go over to, well, you can't go to Goodwill anymore. Goodwill's wised up to the fact that people want to buy these cameras. But you can go to a thrift store and pick up, a very nice SLR from the mid '80s, late '90s, whatever, somewhere in that time period, for $50.
Oh wow!
And then a couple of rolls of film will run you about $10 a piece, and then developing will run you about $6 a piece.
Yeah. Are there still places that Our Photo Developer, is that still a thing?
No, but there are pro labs that still exist.
Okay.
And then certainly, if you really want to go hardcore about it, you can get medium format or large format cameras. So that's something that digital photography hasn't replicated yet. We don't have large format digital cameras, mainly because they would cost about the same as your home mortgage. Well, no, I mean the digital Hasselblad, I believe, is like $30,000 with the 65 megapixel back. I'm gonna double check that.
65 megapixel.
Granted, you have to understand so everything is based off the 35 millimeter standard, right? So a full frame SLR is 35 millimeter. Hasselblad is a medium format camera, so the sensor is about 6 centimeters by 4 centimeters.
That's huge.
Yeah. So that's why it's 65 megapixel, right? It's a big sensor. Granted, the medium format cameras were mainly used by like portrait photographers when you needed to like get a portrait that you could then expand up to be in a magazine or be on a billboard or something like that. They take gorgeous photos. I picked mine up for $75 on eBay, and it was a song at twice the price.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. It's just interesting to me that there's that sort of area where so a lot of people talk about digital as sort of being this democratizing force, and I certainly agree with that because 90% of the people in this country have a digital camera in their pocket and can take photographs with it. Not necessarily good ones, but they can take them, and that's interesting to me.
That's not true. The best camera is the one you have with you.
Well, no, I'm not saying they can't take good pictures.
Very talented with an iPhone.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm not saying that they can't take good pictures. I'm saying they're not necessarily putting the effort in to take good pictures.
Okay.
not that good pictures can't be taken with an iPhone. There's actually, I think Apple has a campaign going on like shot on iPhone 6 or
Yeah.
6S or whatever, because of that. And whereas film is sort of this more niche thing, but that was a big thing for a lot of people. Was like, oh, digital is cheap and easy to access. But it's interesting that that's only in one definition of digital. So these sort of large format things, where shooting film has become is still the cheaper and more efficient option, is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, so I just looked it up because I wanted to make sure I spoke correctly.
Yeah.
The Hasselblad H5D-200C
Mm-hmm.
medium format camera. First off, it's only 50 megapixels, so I apologize there. But it's $45,000.
Oh my gosh.
Just $45,000.
So I'm gonna go take a mortgage out of my house.
Wow. Hey, now's a good time. Interest rates are still low.
Yeah.
So, wow. I had no idea. I mean it's funny. It's like in an age where like everything is getting cheaper faster when it comes to digital, or it seems to be that is still so pricey.
Oh yeah.
And I remember seeing like 50 megapixel cell phone cameras advertised, but I guess
Nokia's got one that's like 41 or something.
So how is a 50 megapixel at a tinier size different from a 50 megapixel at a larger physical size?
I don't know how they're so you know what a pixel is, right?
Picture element.
If you think about the film the sensor in a digital camera is a flat surface, the pixels are little divots in it that collect the light. Sorry, I'm getting over allergies because Texas is
Because
fucking
it's
with me.
Texas.
So if you think about that, to get 50 megapixels on there's a lot of little divots in a small area, and so what'll happen is this thing called noise. And noise is what happens when stray electrons jump into these divots and then get read as light, right?
Okay.
So on a large sensor like this, and I don't know what the exact size is in the Hasselblad. I'm going to say it's a 6 centimeter by 4 centimeter.
It's 43.8 by 32.9 millimeters. I'm looking at the description of it right now.
Okay.
Wow.
So that's
4 by 3 centimeters roughly.
Okay, so that's about what you'd get in a. That's smaller than my film one.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Because my film is 6 by 4 by 4.5.
Well, let me see if I can find some other medium format cameras.
Yeah.
I'm looking at just a website that I googled. So yeah. But it's big. So it's a big sensor.
So it's a big sensor. So the little pixels are a little bit farther apart, less likely that the stray electrons will fall in there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that I was reading about. It was called dark current, I think, when referring to a digital sensor, is like a very low light levels. Anybody who's shot in dark conditions is familiar with this. You see kind of like an increased graininess. The detail goes away. It looks like muddy, and like film. And that's from the. I think this is one of the articles you sent. That's like the reciprocity law failure or something, right? Where the accuracy of the light capture begins to break down, and it happens for film as well, right? At very low light levels.
Yes. Yeah. So if you're like a pinhole photographer, once you get to like the exposures of like 1 minute, 5 minutes, 3 hours, I've done these. It's hell to sit there with your camera shutter open for 4 hours.
Oh.
Excuse me. It definitely does start to lose the ability to record the image. With digital, on the other hand, because you have electricity passing through the circuit, what'll start to happen is it will, and it happens at ISO 100, shutter speed of 1/125th or whatever. These spare electrons will just drop into the circuit. It happens over time. It definitely becomes more noticeable when you up the ISO past 400, because what's happening is to do that, you are passing more electricity through the circuit to kind of amplify whatever signal's there, and
Mm.
so that's what's generating noise.
So it's the methodology itself
Yes.
that's actually causing the problems. That's interesting.
Yes. So whereas with film, you would get, let's say you're shooting at ISO 800 on film, the reason why you see the grain there is because it's actually physical. There's actually more silver in there,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's producing larger silver crystals that are,
Oh.
yeah.
So it's the same effect. It's like it's amplifying the light response, but it's doing so by just piling on more material
Yes.
rather than the equivalent of using more electricity.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, I will
It's so
say,
interesting that there are similar limitations. This is coming back to the debate. It's like there are similar limitations in the film and digital at the extremes, right?
Curse you, physics.
yeah.
And it's like it's like the universe is like, no, I mean you can do it one way or the other way, and like you're still gonna have problems. Like it's not that one is better than the other. You just have different problems.
Well, I will say that aesthetically, I find grain more pleasing than noise.
Oh.
Interesting.
Is that just because that's what you've were exposed to first? Is it sort of a familiarity, or have you explored it at all, like the reasons, or you just go, I like this more and that's good enough?
No, it's so I like that grain is uniform
Okay.
and it's color cast, right? Whereas if you look at it, like if you were to take a really dark photo on your iPhone, it kind of has bluish and then browns and weird areas. And, the noise picks on different color casts depending on where it is in the photo,
Okay.
and it looks gross. It looks like you're shooting through transparent vomit. It's got that kind of that.
Episode title: Transparent Vomit.
Transparent vomit. Done. Noted.
But it has that color cast to it, which I've never really appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
But when you, and I'm struggling to think of which film stock it is. It's an old black and white film stock from Kodak. It had what's called T-grain structure. Well, T-grain structure is what they used to use in motion picture film in like the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So if you overexposed it just slightly and had that massive grain in there,
Yep.
it looked like an old movie. It had that graininess to it.
That's interesting.
And so aesthetically, it's something that's very enjoyable, and it's something very classical. If there was a classical thing in photography.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious
I guess
about like
I cannot
back
think of
then in that age of the tea grain, did they consider it to have a good look, or was it like displeasurable?
It was just the look.
Oh.
That's what film made it look like. So
it's the birth of the industry. It's everything.
But they
the same.
were engineers working to eliminate that, right? Which is why it didn't continue to be a feature of the film, right?
There were engineers working to create what they could create. I believe in that.
Like engineers do.
Yeah. I don't think they saw T-grain as a problem to be solved. I think that the next logical hurdle for them was color.
Mm. Oh yeah.
I've always been a fan of Technicolor myself.
Well, so
I
it
love
seems like
Technicolor. I think they fucked up Wizard of Oz when they got rid of the Technicolor.
Did they?
Go back and watch if you can find it, like a VHS copy.
Yeah.
So the Technicolor was that it was a camera with that shot 3 rolls of black and white at one time, one on the red spectrum, one on the blue.
Yeah, that's how Technicolor worked, which is cool.
And then they layered it up, but because they didn't quite do it right with Wizard of Oz, everything in color had kind of a halo around it, which I think just enhances the dreamlike qualities of being in Oz. Personally.
Yeah.
But they screwed it up on the DVD release when they got rid of it.
So with the DVD release, did they go back and like they went from the original black and white prints and like basically redid the combination?
Yes.
Okay.
Fascinating. I didn't know that. But
yeah,
interesting.
This was how like early color photography was done, though. I remember seeing a series by the Boston Globe of photographs taken in Russia in like the 1910s, so like just pre-World War One, which were done on a film camera in that way, where it actually
Mhm.
did three exposures, and
Yep.
the way it did it is you had three plates, and
Glass
they would
plates.
actually glass plates, and they would actually drop away the mechanism would drop the frame, so you would literally have a clunk clunk clunk, triggering the shutter each time to get the right amount of exposure on each one. So what you had is, weirdly, when you recombined them using a projector, or three projectors, I think, there would sometimes be a misalignment, or if somebody moved in the frame, there would be those artifacts that looked almost the same as like what you get in high dynamic range artifacts in an iPhone nowadays. It's just uncanny, though. Like, we're still dealing with the same problems in different media these days, right?
It's just the laws of physics.
Yeah.
You know,
Compares to physics.
depending on what you're using.
Yeah. There was something in there around the aesthetic judgment of all of this seems to be very like contemporary, and aesthetics do change over time.
Mhm.
And I'll be really curious I'm curious, Simon, if there have been other debates like this between kinds of film in the past, if you're aware of anything like that.
Yes.
All right,
Yes, there
thanks.
certainly have. I'm struggling to think of the most recent one. I would think is probably Kodak came out with a film stock in the mid 2000s called Portra, and I'm gonna be a little facetious here. Portra is a white people film. Portra is made. So one of the problems that Kodak has had to solve over the years is that. So, trying to think of how to phrase this. Uh,
Don't be subtle.
I'm a white guy. I'm gonna go ahead and say this: white guys aren't actually white. We're pink.
Yeah.
Like, we
Yeah.
have pink tones in our skin.
Mhm.
Kodak developed a film to finally fucking solve this. It took them 100 and something years, but they finally solved this. Portrait actually doesn't show the pink tones in skin.
Huh.
Yes,
Weird.
it's wonderful. And basically, they just did this by turning down, because film is multiple layers, and so they took the red layer and altered the red layer so that it doesn't, absorb as much.
Oh, it's sort of like when you do an EQ adjustment on audio, they sort of like turn down the portion of the spectrum that would have responded. Yeah.
Yeah. But that then creates
Wow.
this whole debate about, the race. It's more the racism in photography is the debate.
Well,
between
yeah,
film
which is
stock.
you're definitely getting into like the end points of that, which is something that I've only recently read about. Is the fact that film was originally crafted for the white body.
Yes, the
And so
Tiffany
taking
Wow.
portraits.
yes,
Tiffany. What was her name?
I don't know. I saw this like a week ago and I can't remember.
But yes,
So is it?
absolutely. If you look at African Americans in older photos, they don't
look like people.
they don't look
They
like
don't look like
people.
them.
They're either really, really, really dark, and to the point to where there's no like facial details,
Mhm.
or they are gray.
Lena. Are you thinking of Lena?
Leno.
Lenna, the standard test image.
Yes. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
it's a woman in a black and white dress.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Here's. I think this is the one you're thinking of. There's the. I Google chatted.
Okay.
I can put it in the Zencaster as well.
oh, and now Chrome has to use up all of my RAM to open that link.
Well, it is a Wikipedia page, so.
No.
Yes, but Chrome is very bad at RAM.
Oh, Chrome is so bad, which is why I use Opera most of the time. But I had to use Chrome for this because apparently Zencaster doesn't like Opera.
Yeah, it gets confused.
Yeah.
So that
but
I'm trying to pull this up as well. But so this was like, uh, um, This was a person as like a standard test for
Well,
film.
this photograph of Lena Soderbergh,
Mm.
which actually, believe it or not, was the sort of default test of like film, like you would use this against it. It was also a cropped image from the centerfold of a Playboy.
What?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is got its own problems in sort of making that, again, the standard that all photography and film stock is sort of built off of, sort of like, well, there's this subtext of we're using an image from Playboy to make sure the film looks right.
Because you gotta sell magazines, right?
Yeah. I mean, the image itself is not is cropped in such a way as to not make it particularly lewd or lascivious. Not that, I mean, Playboy, for what it's worth, is my understanding, was generally, fairly tame in its depiction of naked women compared to, the rest of the internet today.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about Shirley.
Okay, I don't know
Shirley
Shirley.
was a different thing. Shirley was the woman in the dress that they would then, yes, it's a white fur dress and a black glove with white pearls, and this is something Kodak made
The
every
Shirley
few
card.
years. The Shirley card, yes.
Okay, yes, yeah. This is more what I meant to be talking about anyway. I was wrong. I'm with you.
So Lena was more the digital scanner era.
Yeah. But tell me about Shirley.
Shirley is exactly what you just described.
Yeah.
I just couldn't think of her name.
Okay.
So I just, you got to read the Wikipedia real quick here, because we're
Yeah.
and
they actually started multiracial cards at some point. I know this one's from 1996 in this article. I don't know at what point they actually did start producing these. I'm sure it was well before 1996.
I hope.
Oh, film has a similar one called The China Girl.
Huh.
Which I'm also looking up here. So this is, it's great that we came around to this. I'm curious, like, is this some instance where digital can somehow be like, can be less biased, right? Toward can we begin to bring our understandings around race and gender and integrate those into the processes by which we aesthetically judge or calibrate these new media? And this is the democratizing force you were talking about, right, Kevin? Is now that the tools are in the hands of many different people, we're beginning to realize the limitations that were put on us by the media in the past, right?
So,
yeah. Go ahead, Simon.
Sorry, go ahead.
You first.
Okay. I was going to say, these Shirley cards were actually made for the lab. They were made for the lab to know how to adjust, the chemicals to reproduce this image, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reproduce this card of Shirley. As such, the camera can see it one way and then be adjusted in the lab, and I think it's still the same way now. The digital camera sees it one way, and then I have to adjust it within my computer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's changed.
Agreed. Yeah, I think those sort of problems still exist.
Excuse me. Stupid Texas.
Stupid Texas.
What allergy season, by the way?
I think it was something blew up the other day from Mexico, and I'm still just recovering from it.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
Everything's terrible. January is usually cedar season, or March, or whatever month we're in is usually cedar. I know we've been feeling that here in Austin.
Mm.
Yeah. I do want to, since we're at sort of a pause point where y'all are looking at things, I do want to mention one of the things that I hate about film is people who insist that film is better than everything else. Most perfectly identified by, I don't know if y'all watched the latest season of Project Greenlight, which you should, because it's really good. It's on HBO Go or just HBO if you have that. And the latest season had a director who thought he was an artistic genius who was insisting on the use of film. Like he wouldn't talk about anything else within the context of making his movie. Jason Mann was his name. Before they would agree to shoot it on film, which costs a lot more money. Again, economy of the shutter. And he made an absolutely terrible film that doesn't even look like it was shot on film.
Oh no!
Because he's not a good director. And I made it about halfway through the movie when I tried to watch it. It was called The Leisure Class, and then I just stopped and never went back. And he fought tooth and nail and had to give up other stuff, and his film was worse because his budget was lower because he insisted on shooting on film. I hate that guy.
Okay.
That's all I got.
I will say that Kodak did just release a brand new motion picture camera.
Yeah.
In January.
Oh, cool.
It's
as in film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of course, because it's Kodak, right? Yeah.
Yes.
That's cool.
And I believe it has a new film stock. I'm not sure about that though.
Yeah, I think he was shooting. I want to say Panavision. I don't know. The movie was bad. Makes me angry.
I'm curious now how digital and the expectations around digital has in turn affected how new film is produced.
That's
right?
something I'm trying to think. That's something that he talked about in the video.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to remember what he said. He said something along the lines of modern filmmakers sometimes shoot film like digital or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't care what you shoot. I'd prefer you to shoot film because it keep the industry alive.
Because you like shooting film.
Yeah.
I thought an interesting thing that came up in the discussion that he had, sort of the email back and forth, was sort of this idea, or some of the idea that film might be inherently better or whatever reason, comes from the fact that a lot of the quote unquote old masters shot on film, and a lot of people who have copied them since shot on film because that's what they shot on. Without actually sort of realizing that the original people shot on film, because that's what there was, and people didn't put in the effort to learn how to shoot on digital to make it look and be the way they wanted it to. And so you have people like Rian Johnson or Christopher Nolan who make pretty movies that are shot on film because that's what they know how to make.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't think so.
Nothing wrong with that.
I think you just have to sort of identify it.
Yeah, I mean it's like the person who taught you used oils when they paint. And you use oils. That's fine.
Yeah.
The whole world of paint out there, but you do you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I guess I was just curious why this is a battle at all. It seems like one of those things where there's plenty of space for both to exist, for all the things on the spectrum to exist, right? Because why does there have to be a war over it?
Because people go on Reddit.
Yeah. Although I'm curious, have either of y'all seen... Or go ahead, finish your thought, Simon.
I was just being mean.
Okay.
You can be mean to Reddit. I think that's perfectly justified.
They've earned it. I'm curious if either of you have seen, because I have not, the film Tangerine that came out last year.
No.
I would really like to, for a couple of reasons, but one of them is that it was shot on an iPhone.
Wow.
I like that.
It was shot on an iPhone 5S. What's interesting is they used a lens and an app that basically made it so that what they shot was what's the word I'm looking for? Widescreen, because the iPhone's basic camera is not a traditional widescreen.
So they just masked the aspect ratio.
Well, so they didn't mask it. With the lens they were using, and I'm trying to find the link. Was kind of like it was a wide angle lens that they then use an app to post process it to make it look correct. I'm describing as poorly.
Yeah, no, I get it. Because there's a little bit of distortion that happens when you make a tiny aperture. Like what the iPhone has is a very tiny lens, and so when you're bringing in light from a very wide angle, there has to be a lot of bending in order to get it into that hole, essentially.
Yeah.
which is starting to sound like I'm describing something else. But anyways, so what the app would then do is correct for that bending in
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And because it's a high enough resolution, you're not losing any quality by doing so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Moondog Labs makes the lens that they used. It was I can't think of the name of it, but they made a lens. Apparently, kickstarted it initially. That does just that. So it's a lens and app combination that lets you shoot sort of this anamorphic widescreen
on an iPhone.
On an iPhone.
It's got really good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. I remember.
Tangerine?
It's still on my list. Yeah.
Yeah. There was an Oscar push for it. I don't think it got nominated for anything. It won Sundance.
Wow.
Yeah, it was also the first Academy Award campaign for an openly transgender actress supported by a film producer, because the two leads are trans women.
Nice.
So that's
this is a great example of just how it's more the story you tell than the technology you use. Yeah.
Which is what Simon said at the beginning. We've been wasting all our time.
Should we wrap it up then? I don't know.
Probably. I think we've come first circle. Yeah. No, I think I don't know why there's an argument about this. I came in here looking for a fight, and now I'm like, shoot what you want.
It's one of those things you can find the fight. I don't understand the point of it. It's the same fight that happens with Canon versus Nikon. It's like, use a shit. Use a
is that a fight?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's okay.
People want to fight because they bought into a system and they want to fight for their system.
Apple and Android, man. Opera and Chrome.
Yeah.
Just calling it,
Mac versus PC. These fights have been bred into us by whatever fucking reason.
Mike versus Joel.
Mike versus Joel. Mike and Joel. How about Canon and Nikon? How about film and digital, right? The world is big enough, y'all.
Yeah. Although there's a new MST3K host now, Jonah, which I have mixed feelings about, but probably
Jonah
not
Hill?
for this show.
Did Jonah Hill
no. Jonah Bray.
Oh.
From the Nerdist.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about that entire project, which is not to say that I didn't give them money to make it happen to see how it turns out, but nobody from the original version of MST3K other than Joel is involved in it.
Is anyone still alive?
Yeah, no, they're all still alive. They're still making things. They're still Riff Tracks is Mike, Kevin, and Bill.
Right. Who were the real MST3K, in my opinion? They were the funniest and best writers, but whatever.
So Mike was the head writer on the show for 8 of its 10 years. So if you like Joel, you also like Mike.
Okay.
Because Mike was writing a lot of those. He was, again, the head writer. But everyone involved in that show is actually still doing things. Trace Ballou and Frank Conniff were a part of Cinematic Titanic, which was a thing for a little while, has now ended. But they're now doing a riffing live show called The Mads Are Back. They played the original Mad Scientists, and they're doing that, and they're on tour, movie riffing live. And so they're all still doing things. They're all still doing that thing, but Joel was interesting in that he didn't apparently ask anybody to be involved from the original series.
Nice.
Oh.
Which made some people angry.
Nice.
All of the people all of the people I just named were very polite and civil about it online. But a lot of people were like, well, why aren't all of these people who are still doing this thing that you're doing involved? And instead, so he recast the bots, he recast the host, he got Felicia Day and Patton Oswalt. I like all these people. I'm not saying they can't make a good thing, but Felicia Day and Patton Oswalt are the new Mad Scientists. So there's it's very much structured to pander to the internet. And is kind of it, and I, again, not having seen it, feels like it might just be MST3K in name only. So we'll see. But I gave him some money so I could see how it turns out.
Everything made
Can
is
we
pandered
bookmark
to the
that?
internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to just briefly, can we bookmark maybe a future show topic as boy, I'm frustrated with people pandering to the internet demographic.
Yeah, I'm sure we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm still
Anyways,
waiting for my wrestling episode.
Oh yeah, we were going to do a wrestling episode.
It was like
Well,
5 years ago.
That was. I have watched as much wrestling now as I had back then.
I think I saw that South Park episode though.
About wrestling?
About yeah,
I didn't know there was one.
yeah, they do a whole thing about like you should watch it. Just look it up. It's
Okay.
amazing and really like actually. I think a lot of the content of that episode would be things we would cover in one of ours.
Cool.
But
Well, Simon, thank you again for joining us. So glad to have you back for the first time in maybe 5 years. I don't know. We'll probably try and have you back again in the not too distant future, somewhere in time and space,
5 years.
to maybe talk about professional wrestling, something that I am very interested in and know very little about. Do you have anything you want to plug? I mean, obviously you mentioned your podcasts. Can people follow you on Twitters? Is that a thing?
At Lanier, L-E-N-I-R-E.
Yeah. Cool. From there, you can probably also find access to all your other podcasts.
And nonsense, yes. All the nonsense I do on the internet.
Yeah. Stephen Torrence, you are still at STORENCE. Did I get that right?
yes, you did, Kevin.
Good job, Kevin. I'm Kevin Saunders. I'm your host here at Bound Philosophy. You can find me at twitter.com/KevSond. Go aware from there. Thank you all for listening. It's been a blast. Bye.
Bye.